discuss this conference and the growing oppression of Christians in the Middle East and elsewhere, the former ambassador to the Holy See and the former mayor of Boston. He is the author of the book, John Paul II, a personal portrait of the Pope and the man, Ray Flynn. Ray, welcome back to America's Forum. It's good to have you here.
It's such an important topic you're discussing, and thank you for doing that.
Well, Ray, we appreciate your time, and let's begin with the obvious. Calling this three-day conference in Washington, your assessment of this invitation to a conference and what might result.
Well, it's long overdue. I'm surprised that it didn't happen a long time ago. The president has been on national television talking about not having a strategy, but one aspect that I hope he does address in his his address to the nation on Wednesday is it talks about this persecution and genocide of Christians in Iraq and throughout the Middle East for that matter. I mean, I was at church yesterday and the priest was talking about it. I've heard the cardinal up here talking about it. They're taking up a special collection in all the parishes in the Archdiocese of Boston. People are concerned about it. The international community is silent. The White House is silent. The media is silent. So what has happened to the conscience of the American government that one time they were in the forefront of these kind of issues? I thought we learned our lesson from Rwanda, from Bosnia-Herzegovina, and certainly from the Holocaust. But apparently those horrendous lessons that we should have learned, we haven't learned yet. America, this is a great shame. And we've got to speak out. Don't depend on your politicians to do it. You speak out, demand that the president and the Congress address this issue in a forthright, direct way.
Ray, you mentioned speaking out. Andrew Bennett, Canada's ambassador for religious freedom, called on the region's influential Muslim countries to kind of step up and condemn the barbaric violation of human dignity. The Muslim community, for the most part, has been pretty silent on this topic. Do you think the Muslim countries will comply?
I'm not sure that they will or not. You know, everybody's quite intimidated. You know, they have other issues and they're concerned about offending their neighbors and so forth. And there's a deafening silence in the world. That's why the voice of moral justice must prevail. I mean, the Pope has spoken out. The Catholic Church has certainly spoken out. The bishops and the cardinals. We have to. The people have to mobilize now and contact their elected officials, particularly the White House. There's no reason in the world why the president should have been on Meet the Press yesterday and having this very important discussion with the people and not mention religious persecution and genocide that is taking place in Iraq and throughout the Middle East. This, I put the responsibility right now into the political hands of the moral conscience of the American people. They must let their government know. This is supposed to be a government for and by the people. Do the people no longer have a say in our domestic and foreign policy? I think they do, but they have to exercise that kind of moral and political leadership. This is an election year, and this is the opportunity now to interject this most important issue in the national agenda so the president and the Congress cannot ignore and walk away from their moral responsibility of addressing injustice which is taking place. Not only injustice, genocide. Genocide means the systematic killing of people on the basis of their race, color, religion, ethnicity. And that is exactly what has happened in Iraq and throughout the Middle East, which means that there is an affirmative action on the part of the international community to speak out. This is suggested in the Geneva Conference. It's not only suggested, this is mandated in the Geneva Conference, which is being ignored, which history is going to say that people have a responsibility to address this issue and to speak out.
Ray, as you mention all of these different topics, a couple of things come to mind. Number one, as the former ambassador to the Holy See, as one who has written about Pope John Paul II, I'm interested in a little more amplification on exactly what Pope Francis has done, because he has stepped out, and that is in stark contrast to, let's say, the 1930s and 40s with Pope Pius and the growing Nazi menace. But you have a situation now where the Pope has spoken out on this issue. Is there more Pope Francis should do?
You know, when you think about it, J.D., that's a great question. Going back to the Holocaust, going back to Rwanda and Bosnia, Herzegovina, going back to the communism in Eastern Europe, Poland, John Paul II, my dear friend, addressed this issue, and they say that Pope John Paul II, President Reagan, and President Lech Walesa of Solidarność were the three main people responsible for the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. The Pope has an extraordinary amount of credibility that he can speak out and address. The Pope has, Pope Francis has, the Catholic Church has, the Catholic bishops has. J.D., there's something different happening in America today. The national press is not giving people like us a voice anymore in these kind of issues. They're not giving the Pope an opportunity to be completely heard and address these kind of issues. When the president doesn't speak out, when the national media ignores the voice of the Holy Father and the religious community, then what you have is deafening silence. That's why what you're doing here today is very, very important. I wish I were on Meet the Press yesterday, because when the people would have heard that, it would have been a call to action. There was no call to action yesterday by the president. I hope there is a call to action by the president in his national address on Wednesday, and I hope the national media will listen to the suffering people of Iraq who don't have a voice, but they do that through the conscience of the people of the United States, as I heard yesterday in church in Braintree, St. Clair's in Braintree, and as the people are digging deep into their pockets to support the humanitarian aid. The people are there. The political support is there. The White House, the Congress is stone deaf. They're not listening to it, and so is the international community. Let it begin now. Injustice anywhere is a threat to injustice in our own backyard.
Ray, you mentioned basically giving a voice to the voiceless. If our leaders aren't doing enough, what can people at home do to...
Well, there's a lot they can do. They could certainly pick up the phone immediately, and they can call their local representatives and ask them to communicate to the White House, to the State Department. They can call their local church and tell them that they support them 100%. They can support the humanitarian effort that's taking place in all parishes, I think, throughout the United States this weekend to help the humanitarian effort in Iraq. And they can just keep their voice strong and clear. I mean, there's nothing the people of the United States can't do if they put their mind to it, if they're determined. Every voice, every vote counts in America. And right now we have a silence, and now we have to hear those voices if we're going to bring this kind of justice to our foreign policy, which has been absent for such a long period of time. These aren't bad people that are in politics. They're good people. But sometimes good people act in almost in a political way that they're not sure what to do, how to vote, how to express themselves. Well, let that voice and let that encouragement come from the people of the United States. Tell the Congress people how they feel. Call them today. These Congress people are around. This is an election year. They're around. Let them know how they feel, and I'll bet you will hear President Obama speak about this Wednesday. Today's Monday. If everybody picks up their phone and calls their congressman and tells them that they want them to contact the White House, I'll bet you two donuts that the president will address this issue on Wednesday.
Let's hope so, Ray. We've got less than a minute, really about 45 seconds. Before we part company, do you have any updates on the reported connection between the Boston bombers and that ISIS social media mastermind? The talk is they met or they attended the same mosque there in Boston. 30 seconds.
I'm not surprised at all, because this is such a, there's so many students, there's so many colleges and universities, there's been such a tolerance for these radical Islamists around here, and I'm not surprised at all. I don't have any specific information, but when I see these protests and demonstrators and against the United States government policy.
Ray, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your time. America's Forum continues.